welcome our people who are joining us by Zoom and as well as our live audience. I need to be by the camera as well as addressing you folks. And thank you for coming, and I hope you're enjoying the Earth Week festivities. David Anderson is the chief organizer for all the events taking place in Red Wing, so please go to the Earth Week Red Wing website to see all the events taking place. And this event is also, I want to mention, it's being recorded, so you can see it on our Peace Talk website. I wrote our website on the top of that board there, where you'll be able to go and see the program later. And if you're not familiar with the Ignite building, the bathrooms are down that hallway. My name is Bill Hopnock. I'm the Executive Director of Veterans for Peace 115 here in Red Wing. So, and we often have events like this. Now that the pandemic is supposedly ending, we can maybe do more of this, but we're glad to be able to do it again. Veterans for Peace is a national organization of, obviously, of veterans. I'm an associate member, I'm not a veteran. So, but you can join as a non-veteran. And a lot of people, about 25% of the membership is non-veteran. So if you want to join, please ask Barry or me, myself, how to join up. And so now I want to introduce my good friend and colleague, Barry Reish. He's with Veterans for Peace, Chapter 27 in Minneapolis, St. Paul. He's also been the past president of that organization, as well as a national president at one time. But now he's critically involved in climate crisis and militarism. So I'm glad he could join us. Normally we start our events by reciting our mission statement. I left copies of that on there. You can follow along with us if you choose, but the reason we do this is because it clearly states what our purpose is and what we are, what we do. So we'll recite our mission statement at this time. We, as military veterans, do hereby affirm a greater responsibility to serve the cause of world peace. To this end, we will work with others, both nationally and internationally, to increase awareness of the cause of war, to restrain our governments from intervening overtly and covertly in the internal affairs of other nations, to resist racism and repression in our home and communities, to oppose militarism of law enforcement, to end the arms race and to reduce and eventually eliminate nuclear weapons, to seek justice for veterans and victims of war, to abolish war as an instrument of national policy. To achieve these goals, members of Veterans for Peace pledge to unite peace, to maintain an organization that's both democratic and open, with understanding that all members are trusted to act in the best interests of the group for the larger purpose of world peace. Thank you. Now I will call upon Barry to introduce our speaker for tonight. Barry?
Thanks, Bill. So do you want me to stand or what should I do?
Whatever you choose.
Yeah, so anyhow, I'm gonna do a little reading. So yeah, Chapter 27, lifetime member of Veterans for Peace, lifetime member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars also, even though I don't necessarily agree with some of their philosophies. But I'm gonna talk a little bit about, I'm a part of the Veterans for Peace Climate Crisis and Militarism Project Working Group. I'm on the steering committee with Gary here. And I just wanna give you a little bit of introduction about how we came about. You know, we as veterans have been aware for years of the impact of the military on our Earth and its contribution to the climate crisis, and have been concerned that especially with environmental groups, the subject has not been broached. Thus, at our national convention in 2020, a group was formed called the Climate Crisis and Militarism Project. To address these connections, our goal is to educate and motivate others to help stop U.S. militarism and reverse its environmental impact. We feel that our movements for climate justice will not succeed unless they include challenging U.S. militarism and its roles in the climate crisis, which is significant. So as you will learn tonight. So That being said, I'm going to now introduce Gary Butterfield, member of chapter. He's a 67, drafted 67 during the Vietnam War. Member, lifetime member of Veterans for Peace, and he member of chapter 91. He's also on the steering committee along with me on the CCMP. He's the co-developer of our slide. One of the ways that we have set out to educate the public about the climate crisis, we developed a slide presentation, and Gary has been the main man in charge of that. He says he's a co-producer, but he's actually does the bulk of the work himself. How many times have we revised it? Like 200 times? Constantly trying to revise it and get it something that is presentable. You know, you learn trial and error. So anyhow, but Gary's been involved with the bulk of that work. So he can take the credit for that. Just for FYI, people on Zoom land, you can we'll have a question and answer at the end. You can do the Q&A on your screen, and you don't have to go to chat. Just go to Q&A on your screen, and I'll have a couple of announcements afterwards. Hopefully during that about some upcoming stuff. I got some announcements too. Okay, Gary, take it away. 200 times, constantly trying to revise it and get it something that is presentable. You know, you learn trial and error. So anyhow, but Gary's been involved with the bulk of that work. So he can take the credit for that. Just for FYI, people on Zoom land, we'll have a question and answer at the end. You can do the Q&A on your screen, and you don't have to go to chat. Just go to Q&A on your screen, and I'll have a couple of announcements afterwards. Hopefully during that about some upcoming stuff. I got some announcements too. Okay, Gary, take it away.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Bill. And thank you, people of Red Wing, for allowing me to share part of Earth Week with you all. We're getting ready in San Diego here to do a live in-person Earth Day down at Balboa Park downtown. And a lot of what we talk about is directly taken from this slideshow. So I appreciate your interest, and I hope we can generate some dialogue and some questions at the end. Now that I'm sharing screen, I'm really not going to be able to see any audience hands or anything, so I'll defer to Barry if something comes up during the presentation. You know, I was drafted in '67. I was in the Army, and I really felt that it wasn't the right thing for me to do, but I lasted my 2 years and got out and raised a family. And I'm also part of San Diego 350.org. And so I'm involved with the environment locally here as well with the actions that we take. But I'm also a grandparent, a parent and a grandparent. And I'm really convinced that it's up to us. We have to do better at leaving this place when we leave. And it became apparent to me in talking with my San Diego 350 climate activists that I'd have to say they had an underappreciation, if you will, of the military's impact on the climate crisis. They were aware of what the military wanted to do in response to it, as far as rising sea level and what they were going to do with Norfolk and San Diego and all of those ships, and what's going to happen when Miami Beach goes underwater and everything. But they really didn't have an appreciation of how much the military contributes. So I want to take a few moments of your time and talk about the military's impact on greenhouse gases and pollution, and also how much of our tax dollars the military spends and what we might do with that more effectively. So typically, if we were to present this to a climate activist group, we'd spend a little time going over what Veterans for Peace does. I just shortly say that we feel that violence should be the last resort of how humans resolve conflicts among each other and leave it at that. But I feel that this slide really captures the essence of the threat that climate change and U.S. militarism bring together for the human condition. On the left, of course, we see Greta Thunberg, and she talks and reminds us that we are indeed in a crisis. Our house is on fire. We need to react. And I noticed that there are a few of you in the audience who have gray hair like me, and you might remember President Eisenhower, the ex-general. He was a two-term president, but he warned us back in the 50s about the dangers that lie behind relying too much on a military industrial complex. And what he says is every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, and the hopes of its children. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some facts. And I'd like to point out that virtually everything that we refer to in this program can be found at our website, vfp.org climate crisis. And we can drop that into the chat later, or Barry can write it on the board for those of you in the hall there. But it's amazing when you think about the fact that the U.S. military is the largest single institutional user of fossil fuels, and hence it is the single largest emitter of greenhouse gases, of carbon dioxide. And that's a fact that climate activists rarely look at. This is one entity. And so let's take a peek at it. Let's not keep it wrapped in secrecy like the military would like you to think it is. In fact, we point out that the US government and military has actively been trying to obscure the accurate accounting of the pollution that the military inflicts upon our environment. This goes back to the 1997 Kyoto Protocol, which came out of a meeting of climate scientists of many of the nations of the world back in 1997. But the US was instrumental in having many of its military, or any country's military emissions, being counted. And even though the US never signed onto the Kyoto Protocol, that exemption passed. And this was for all countries in the world. So there was never a drive to accurately record and account for military emissions. Well, the Paris Accords of 2015 weren't much better. They left the military emissions up to the individual countries. It was voluntary. So we really don't hear much about it. So when we talk about a fact such as the B-52 using as much fuel in an hour as the average car driver uses in 7 years, it comes from a series of estimations and some reporting. And this actually is from the National Priorities Project at the Institute for Policy Studies. We draw on this type of information as well as from Brown University and other investigators. And of course, if jet fuel is the single largest component of greenhouse gases, the US has the world's largest military aircraft fleet. We have about 13,000 in our aircraft fleet. The rest of the world has about 15,000 in total. In fact, if the US military was a single country, it would rank as number 47 among the 175 countries or so that report in the world of greenhouse gas emissions. Number 47, this is just from calculating emissions from fuel usage. So that's one single entity. And again, these figures are estimates since the military does not provide complete values for their emissions. Now in San Diego, we see it virtually every year. We had a break for 2 years because of COVID, but the Blue Angels come. And the question this year that we're posing is this practice, entertainment, or pollution? I mean, this is a matter of choice that they come here. Each time they fly, it uses about 9,000 gallons of jet fuel each hour. That would produce the equivalent of carbon dioxide that's produced by a car being driven about 150,000 miles. So I guess, this would be something for us to think about when we see a flyover at a sports event. And of course, accurately accounting for military emissions is really a difficult task. We've got military R&D, we've got production of weapons, we've got weapons testing, troop training, we've got wars, conventional wars, drones, weapons sales, arms races, war games, military contractors. And then at the end of any type of conflict or war, you've got cleanup and reconstruction. And certainly, if the reconstruction involves a lot of concrete, you're talking additional greenhouse gases that are put out into the atmosphere. Now, with the US finally ending the 20 plus years of war in Afghanistan, one would think that we might see some type of reduction in military emissions and military spending, but it really seems like we've immediately gone into seeing a lot of increased noise directed at both China and Russia. Now, on the left, you see war games that are conducted in the Pacific. They routinely involve the US, British, Australian navies. There are regular exercises, if you call them exercises, with South Korea and Japan. And of course, if we look at Europe, which we'll address in a couple of more slides as well, NATO had virtually surrounded Russia with a ring of ballistic missiles in spite of prior promises to refrain from such provocative actions. And again, military exercises are conducted on a routine basis. And as part of that, the US maintains approximately, and this is really to me an astounding number, approximately 750 bases in over 80 countries internationally. These bases range in size from very small lily pads that typically provide pre-positioned weaponry and supplies to huge complexes that include hospitals, bowling alleys, golf courses, their own power plants. And some of you who are veterans have experienced some of that. They're very extensive. This, incidentally, is from the book Base Nation by David Vine. Think about the supply lines it takes, the fossil fuels, to maintain these bases. You can see there's many of them clustered throughout the Middle East, which provides protection for the fossil fuel industry. You also see them in Asia and Europe. So at the end of the day, the military, in supporting these international bases, also maintains a fleet of vehicles that totals nearly 200,000. And this includes, for example, 75,000 Humvees, which typically get 4 to 6 miles per gallon. And except for approximately 80 or so nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers, the entire military fleet runs on oil. And of course, we have the latest branch of U.S. military service called the United States Space Force. And it also involves a heavy carbon load for its computers, rockets, and other devices that they launch. So we know that there is no such thing as a green war. The effects of war and preparation for war are polluting and long lasting. And we know that even in the Ukraine, which is from the picture on the left there, the buildup, the short term and the long term impacts from the fighting are generating extreme amounts of greenhouse gas emissions. And reconstruction, which will come eventually, will be a further and significant carbon cost made necessary by the conflict. We know from experience that even 50 years after the Vietnam War, children there are still maimed by unexploded ordnance or born with severe birth defects from the transgenerational impact of Agent Orange. I mean, even here in San Diego, we raised our kids in a suburb, and it was adjacent to a fenced off area. Well, it happened to be that the fenced off area was an old World War II Army base called Camp Elliott. And it was fenced off because of unexploded ordnance. And of course, 2, 8, and 10-year-olds decided to go exploring and lost their lives because of the unexploded ordnance. That's even in our own country. On the right, you see a picture of a burn pit. That's an open site of solid waste incineration, and who knows what chemicals are in there. They've been the subject of lawsuits by veterans and civilians alike. Something in the news that is pretty alarming to me, since we have several military air bases nearby, but forever chemicals, PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, they're a group of man-made chemicals first synthesized by DuPont for Teflon coating on pans, and it seems to be ubiquitous in many other consumer products, such as waterproofing boots and clothing. It's even in dental floss and makeup, but it can cause reproductive damage and other cancers. A primary use, though, of PFAS, which concerns us at Veterans for Peace, is that PFAS are widely used in firefighting foam to put out jet-fueled fires at airports and specifically military air bases. And there are many bases throughout the country where that water has been polluted because of the runoff of these PFAS chemicals. In fact, the Biden administration's EPA is set to reclassify 2 of the most common PFAS compounds as hazardous chemicals and make them subject to Superfund status for cleanup. This is residue from military airfields and training exercises. And of course, we can't forget if nuclear weapons are ever used. I mean, there's still probably 12,000 in the world, but uranium mining and processing and production of nuclear weapons all have tremendous carbon footprints, even without exploding them. So there's a host of activities and substances that the military is involved with. And we at the Climate Crisis and Militarism Group feel that we need accurate accountability of all of this. We're being asked as citizens to make some tough decisions when it comes to the climate crisis. And we feel that our military should be acting in a responsible fashion as well. There is some activity, I'm pleased to say, although it's really not enough. The Army has put forth a climate strategy which is aimed at reducing the military's carbon footprint by some. Their plan, though, is to be net zero in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. They want to develop electrical tactical vehicles, and they want to look at their procurement process as well. So these are steps in the right direction, but the 2050 timeline really seems like it should be accelerated a whole lot. We feel that reducing the footprint goes way beyond solar panels on infantrymen's backpacks and experimental biodiesel for some naval vessels. And in fact, in the Army's report, they do not cloak it in an attitude of true climate mitigation, but they want to be able to more effectively accomplish their mission, which is to win wars. Now, the current war in Ukraine, aside from the mere travesty of the invasion by Putin's Russia on Ukraine, is having a severe impact on our environment as well. It's really just more of the same. And what we're seeing is increased military spending, increased usage of armaments, and this is creating increased emissions. Even United States climate envoy John Kerry said that the Ukraine war hinders any united effort to try to deal with the climate challenge. The current conflict magnifies the environmental and climate impacts of war in preparation for war. And as all of these countries ramp up their military spending, we see that this new arms race really is in direct conflict with any type of climate goal to keep the temperature rise under 1.5 degrees centigrade. So we've got a catastrophe awaiting us at the same time. As Greta says, this is code red for humanity. Slide is just a reminder that the goals are to have emissions peak by 2025. And you can see from this graph, it's a little busy, but we're still on an uptick here when we need to be ratcheting these down. Now, this topic, averting climate catastrophe, no new arms race, is actually a national webinar that Veterans for Peace is putting on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, and that can also be accessed through our website. So we've looked at how the military pollutes. Let's look at how it spends and what it spends on money. Now, this slide may be a little difficult to read, but the lead table here with all the action and all the food and the waiters is a gentleman wearing a war outfit. So he's at a banquet table, and what we see in the back are healthcare, sciences, arts, education, all being starved for funding. And we know that the U.S. has spent nearly $16 trillion on war in the past 2 decades. Now, at Veterans for Peace, we don't have an issue with soldiers and sailors. We have issues with politicians who spend this money and make the policies. And looking at this amount of money, instead of funding endless wars, there are a variety of activities that probably you can think of a couple of them. Maybe decarbonize the U.S. electric grid, um, provide COVID vaccines for low-income countries, um, erase student debt. I don't know. There are a lot of opportunities to spend money. I mean, we look at the discretionary budget for fiscal year 2022, and although President Biden did spend more money on non-military items in the budget, he actually increased the military budget over what Trump had. And this number of 765 was even increased further by Congress. And the graph is a little busy, but the big blue part of the pie represents the military. But that's not even the total military, because many items that you think should be in the Department of Defense budget are omitted. For example, nuclear weapons, that's actually a line item in the energy column. Don't forget veterans benefits, Homeland Security, border enforcement, the intelligence agencies, and of course the massive annual interest payment that's due on the military's portion of the national debt. Totaled up, the amount spent easily surpasses $1.25 trillion. In both parties, both major political parties routinely approve the National Defense Authorization Act with very little discussion. And we know that in that the contractors, the military contractors, have done a superb job of making their defense business a jobs issue, in that they put jobs to produce, say, the F-35 or a tank or some type of ship in many congressional districts. So cutting the military budget or redirecting the military budget seems to be something that they are hesitant to talk about. But we feel we do need to talk about it, and we do need to hold the Defense Department, the Pentagon, we need to hold them accountable. We're not saying we need to get rid of it, but we're saying let's hold them accountable. It's our tax money, and it's a matter of priorities. So when we look and dive deeper, we spend $81 billion a year guarding the world's oil supply. One contractor itself, Lockheed Martin, received $75 billion. And it seems that whenever there's some type of crisis that in their mind demands a military response, they can always find the money for that, but it's difficult to find money for schools, for kids, for healthcare. And who benefits? Well, for example, the Big Five CEO, the chief executive officers of the biggest five contractors, General Dynamics, Raytheon, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, their average compensation was $22 million for one person. And this is for something in the defense industry. And just, as an example, a Stinger anti-aircraft missile, we've heard a lot about those from Ukraine. Well, they're $38,000 a piece. The Javelin anti-tank missile, $78,000 a piece. So, the U.S. is supplying it. The Biden administration has already committed to providing $3.2 billion in military aid, but the contractors are getting rich off of it. Now, just briefly, there is an issue. There's an organization called the International Organization on Immigration. Well, they estimate that by 2050, there will be anywhere from 200 million to 1 billion climate refugees due to the climate crisis. And we see the developing countries' responses, such as USA, China, Russia, the European Union. Well, they're actually erecting border walls to keep out refugees. And as an example, what this chart demonstrates is that merely we have spent significantly more money on militarization projects at the border than on actual climate financing. And a quote that I'd like to share with you is from an investigative journalist called Christian Parenti. And he says, "The US government is dead serious about climate change, but not in the way you might think. While carbon taxes and green grids remain decidedly out of reach on Capitol Hill, planners at the Pentagon have been quietly preparing to take charge of a planet shaken by climate chaos." And Christian Parenti refers to plans like these as the politics of the armed lifeboat. So we look at how much money is spent on the military. It's more than the next 11 countries combined. There are others besides Veterans for Peace that are calling for a better accountability and a redirection of some of this money. In fact, the Poor People's Moral Budget, they're asking for a $350 billion reduction. And in their analysis, they looked at it, and their point of view is that with specific targets, reducing the Pentagon spending can be done without affecting the so-called security of the United States. And one of the things that we hear, an argument that we hear, is that the defense sector provides good paying jobs. Well, as part of the analysis and looking at a just transition to a greener economy, this is something that was done from Brown University and the Cost of War Project. Essentially, what they're saying is that for every $1 million that are invested in creating jobs, say in the defense industry, we could actually get a much higher return on our investment in those jobs for people if those jobs were in healthcare, if they were in infrastructure or education, rather than merely in the defense sector. Now, I've given you some heavy data, but I feel that it provides good background. People in their local communities are doing good things at local levels, but we can't lose sight of the biggest polluter that we have in the world, the single biggest institutional emitter of greenhouse gases. So we've been successful with Congresswoman Barbara Lee. She has introduced a House resolution to require accountability of all military emissions with an eye towards reducing those emissions so that we can meet those climate goals of limiting the temperature rise. We have created a robust website, veteransforpeace.org, Take Action Climate Crisis. I'll show you a screenshot next, but we've made it easy for you to talk and send a note to your congressperson to become a co-sponsor of House Resolution 767. You merely click and put in your zip code, and it will personalize a letter for you. Now, I checked, and there are 32 co-sponsors in the House on this bill, but none are from your area. Now, Barry, at this point, you probably should pull out some bumper stickers. I can't see you. I hope you're doing that. But that's
all
one.
up, Gary. I'm
Well,
all up. You
You've
got one
also
there?
given this slideshow presentation to about 60 groups. And one of the things we ask of you is if you see value in spreading this knowledge, can you find an opportunity for us? We have about 8 people who are trained to deliver this presentation, and we have given it to other Veterans for Peace groups. We've given it to local climate groups such as Sunrise Movement, 350.org. We've done peace action groups, and we've done local sustainability groups and social justice groups affiliated with churches. So we would ask you to help us line up a presentation. All you would do is give us the contact. We also meet with congressional representatives and do media outreach. Now, this is a screenshot of our webpage. On the upper left, you see the tab to support House Resolution 767. There are robust resources under downloadable resources. We provide an opportunity for you to schedule a presentation or to get more information by clicking on this button. And we've also included some various videos to back up the information that we've given you here. There's Barry's bumper stickers. On the left, there's an informational trifold brochure. I've personally printed up a couple hundred to take to Earth Day this Sunday for me. I hope to generate a lot of conversation with them. We're all in this together. We need your help. I hope I've provided you some food for thought. Let's open it up to see if we have any discussion about this. Thank you for your attention.
None from online.
Oh, none from online.
How about our audience? Questions?
I'd like to look.
We have, Bruce Gagnon from, what's Bruce's title of his organization? Global Actions Against Weapons of Space or whatever it is? He's really up to speed about it, but it's all technology, it's the next generation, of course, is cyber. So, we got to protect our cyberspace or whatever, It's just another technology boondoggle, another way to make money is what it is, my understanding.
I would add that the Space Force is a government organization, but there's a lot of private enterprises now that are sending things into space that we have no idea. They're all total in secret. We have no idea what the government is arranging for them to send us into space.
We've got to protect ourselves too from aliens, seriously, that's part of the rationale.
We need to welcome it.
Yeah, that's part of the rationale why they have to have this stuff, They're the enemy, of course, Anybody that approaches this planet, it's got to be the enemy. They can't possibly be friendly, Gotta protect ourselves. Comments? Comments? We have comments? We're always open to feedback,
I would add that people are so reluctant to talk about this issue because it seems like you're talking negative about the military. But I always ask people to ask this question of themselves: Is the military providing the security we seek? And I think if you seriously investigate this question, you'll understand that no, it is not. So, but people need to, we can't worship the military all the time. We need to make them accountable.
That's exactly right. And it's a fine line that we walk, especially here in San Diego. San Diego is a huge military town. But if we as citizens don't question the decisions on how our money is being spent and where it's being spent, it's like feeding an addict. You know, the addict is always going to feed his addiction first. And when you have contracts where the cost of a jet doubles and it's open-ended, that's not in our best interest. I mean, they're having trouble even deploying the F-35, but we need to have a frank discussion with a discerning eye. I mean, if the Pentagon cannot pass their audits, they're getting money, increased money every year, and they don't even know where it's going. And so we're being asked to make some hard decisions, and we want to say, let's have our military make some hard decisions. Our politicians make some hard decisions, because the climate crisis is not waiting for us to catch up with it. It is here and it is now. And, you know, they say we've got maybe 2 or 3 years until the 1.5 is going to drift into 2.0. And, you know, I'm not going to be around to see it. I'm 74, but my kids and grandkids are. And I think that we've got to take the position that the military is not sacrosanct. I mean, those of us who served in the military know that there are opportunities to be more thoughtful and accountable. But when nobody holds you accountable, why should that entity care?
But there's no way to hold the Congress accountable. There's no petitioning the government at this point that's going to be any remedy. We have to take the power from the people who are running the show.
You're absolutely right.
The question is, how are we going to do that? You don't know this, but I'm running for Congress. I'm a lifelong peace activist and climate activist.
Okay.
But the thing we need to do right now is we got to stop this war. And Biden has the power to do it if he wants to. Unfortunately, this administration wants to prolong the war. We never should have been in this. George Kennan, the architect of the Cold War policy, the entire consensus of the military post-Cold War is you do not expand NATO to the east, or you're asking for trouble. You're asking for exactly what we got. We've added 14 countries to the east. Do you think that Russia is going to put up with the Ukraine being in NATO after they've been invaded by as many times as they have and lost these millions of people? Of course not. And they knew that. Our foreign policy establishment, led by George Kennan, the most brilliant architect there was, said you cannot do that. It's the worst thing you could possibly do. We did it anyway. We goaded them into the war, and we could get out of it right now, but Biden doesn't want to. So there is, and we have, this is the absolute worst thing that could have happened in terms of the climate. Not only the war, but now the escalation, our escalation, Europe's escalation, it's the death knell. It's the death knell.
That's right. And so now we have an arms race, which you know is self-perpetuating. And you're absolutely right. But that's a different issue. What we're attempting to do with this type of presentation is to get climate activists out of their silo and peace activists out of our silos. And you're further down the path than many of the audiences that we address. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I've got a slide on the doomsday clock, and it's, you know, at the start of the year, it was 90 seconds. I don't know if they pushed it up because of, you know, the Russian intervention to 60 seconds, but they've taken climate change and wrapped it up with the nuclear issue, that they're both existential threats. And to me, when I talk to my climate activist only friends, you know, who are focused on local water issues and such. They want to put their heads, some of them want to put their heads in the sand about what the military is doing. And that's what we're trying to do, is to get these people out of their silos and get them better educated, to ask questions and to vote for people. I mean, if that's your platform, I find that very appealing. But we had Duncan Hunter out here for years, and they're just military hawks. But we're starting to educate people, and that's why we came together to do this. It's critical. I mean, time is running out, and so you're doing what you can do, and I applaud you for that. We're doing what we can do. We don't get paid for doing this, but we feel passionate enough that people need to say, the military, it exists. Maybe we need something for defense, but by God, let's hold them accountable, because they're choking us. They're helping to choke us to death.
I just want to talk, I just talked about this, but, this Army strategy, as Gary talked about it, it describes the ways the Army plans to switch to renewable energy, reduce greenhouse gases, and build their version of resilience. A good plan indeed from one branch of the world's largest institutional polluter. In the opening statements of this report, it states that climate change endangers national and economic security. The Army's core purpose remains unchanged: to deploy, fight, and win the nation's wars by providing ready, prompt, and sustainable land dominance as part of the joint force. So they're, going green, but it's still the same job, But that's going to take resources, and you watch our budget's going to go up, greening the Army and the military, but it's really taken away from, resources that can be used in a positive direction. So just there was a closing statement is the U.S. can choose one of two courses: to completely recast its military mindset for the sake of emissions cuts, or else just slot some greener tech into its massive war machine, like a 700 billion Bradley tank with a new hybrid engine. And I close with that, so please, when you hear that military is greening up, don't buy it. You're still up to the same madness with all our precious tax dollars and resources. One can only hope and dream for a day when the military becomes extinct. But anyhow, the point is that it's not going to solve the problem by greening the military. It's just going to make it worse, and take more resources. So I just want to throw that in there. But yeah, and that, there's lots of rationale why what's happening in Ukraine, but the point is that we're trying to focus on the environmental impact of it, rather than discussing who's cause and, what's the U.S. involvement.
But the important thing is Biden could end it. That's what's important at this point.
Well, yeah.
And he doesn't want to.
No, of course not. The armament manufacturers had his throat, and they're opening up, the oil and drill, baby, drill. It's money. I mean, it's all about money, and
our objective is to wear down Russia, just like we did with them in Afghanistan.
That's right. Yeah. It's intentional policy.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's totally contrary to, like you're talking about, the climate crisis. But what's going to get us is the climate crisis. And this has just exacerbated the problem.
My name is Bill Nasseth. I am a senior trustee for AMVETS Minnesota, and I constantly bring up in our executive meetings and in our national annual meeting the business of why veterans aren't really leading the race here and doing something about what the huge amount of money that's assigned to the military, and in various ways that don't even show up in the budget, so to speak, for the military. And it bothers me a great deal talking with veterans who are essentially indifferent about the whole thing. It isn't that they're pro this, pro that. They tend to pick up this thought and idea that it has something to do with the people that participate and serve in the military. And there's really not much connection there with the bucks and where all of that money goes. I'm very happy to see that we have a person running for District 1 who is is very much in focus along our thinking here. I belong to the local VFP group, and I'm a vice commander of AMVET's 19 post here in town, and the Legion, and it's all of these folks that I think should be most interested in getting out of the business of shooting one another and killing one another just seem to look the other way. They have their head in the sand, and I really don't have a good answer for it either. I bring it up, and it doesn't go anywhere. And Bill and I and this fellow here, you know, and we're active in Veterans for Peace, and it seems like it should be growing, but it's really not here in Minnesota. It's kind of in a dead spot. So. And thank you for your talk from San Diego. I love San Diego.
Quick question.
Two questions. One is, this is mind-blowing, sitting and hearing about how much money is going to the military, how much pollution, you know, all that kind of stuff. So has this presentation been given to high school, college students so we can involve and encourage them to get involved in this advocacy effort? And then I now can't remember my second question, so it'll come to me.
But we're counting on you.
Right.
We're counting on all of you to help spread the message. We're ready anytime, any place, anywhere, you know, and we're doing the best we can to get this thing out. We talked to 5 people, 20 people, you know, classroom would be great. But, you know, we're just saying.
I've personally given it to 3 college classes with more scheduled. In fact, we have a gentleman running for Congress in Long Beach, California, who's a professor at a local college up there. And we're going to do a set of his poli-sci classes to talk about it. But yeah, they're ripe for it, but we depend on all of you to find opportunities for us. You just need to put us in contact with the person who can schedule it, and we can have conversation with them and work out how much time they'll give us. And I mean, with Zoom, we can do it anywhere.
But especially with the environmental groups, you know, Bill McKibben doesn't talk about militarism. Greta Thunberg doesn't talk about militarism, you know, but during the past year, there has, you know, because of the resolution with Barbara Lee in Congress, it's at least, the subject is at least being broached about, you know, the emissions not being reported. And, you know, I doubt they ever talked about it before, you know, but, you know, so, and we feel like we made significant progress. Plus, there's a lot of peace and justice groups now that are talking about militarism. It's much more out of the hiding or whatever, you know. So that's our hope, is to keep talking to anybody, you know, classrooms, whoever, you know.
So if I want to go home tonight and reach out to my legislators, again, I go to Veterans of Peace website and can click on what you talked about earlier, Gary, and it's there, and I can just sign my name and hit send.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up and I'll share screen.
Yeah, I have a flyer here that's got the website on it.
Okay.
Do you? Okay.
But yeah, all of our resources are right there. You can print brochures. We got, you know, I local the bumper stickers. I'm sorry, I'm all out, so I didn't bring any along. But you know, it's a simple thing.
Sure.
It's a simple thing. People, what can I do? Well, put a bumper sticker on your comment, and it helps open eyes and open minds, you know.
This will also be available on videotape, and we can disseminate it any way we want, but for now it'll be on the Veterans for Peace page and their Facebook page.
Peace Talk, yeah.
Peace Talk.
Yeah, and this is you should sign up for this webinar Friday at 6 Central. I'm just going to say the speakers are Ann Wright, you know, U.S. Army, retired U.S. Army Colonel. Eric Edstrom is the Afghan vet, author of Un-America, the Soldiers' Reckoning of the Longest War. And Dr. David Vine is a professor of anthropology author of The United States of War. They'll be speaking Friday at this webinar. You can register on the national, and I have it on our local Veterans Chapter 27 website too if you want to register. Just get that in, get that plug in there.
So on our website, if you go to our page, there's one called Take Action. And if you hit Support House Resolution 767, it takes you to this page and you populate it and then click it and it goes right to your congressperson.
Okay, thank you.
And to schedule a presentation, you merely click on this one and it sends me an email and I'll contact that person and I'll be forever grateful for you.
Yeah, but classrooms, excellent idea, of course. Yeah. You know,
I wanna add
it'd be
that,
nice if we had the military budget for recruitment, that if we could have the budget, I mean, we could be all over the place, but we're, a couple dozen people, involved in this thing and, we just don't have the resources that the military does.
David Anderson was the chief organizer of our Red Wing Earth Week events here, and he came up with a theme, I think you did, educate, mitigate, and advocate, and then mitigate. So we're in the next step now. We're going to mitigate, which means you need to take this to every organization you belong to. We need to make this widespread, because the more organizations we get involved in this, the better chance we have to end this in time.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, and this is what we're trying to do this year. I mean, this is the education that needs to happen. And then once we learn about this, to take that step to advocate for change, to lead to that mitigation effort to reduce those greenhouse gases. So that other people much smarter than me came up with that theme. I just was smart enough to say, that's it, let's go with it.
It's interesting. My
Thanks
church,
for choosing that.
my church group has a climate change group, and I've been after them to let us do the climate presentation, and they don't want to, because what am I going to do? Well, educate yourself first of all, and
Right.
become aware of the issue, and then put on a bumper sticker. Call your congressman, sign a resolution. It's not like it's not like we're asking you for major surgery. We just wanted to present this to you, but they're very resistant, and then they hear the greening of the military. They're all in for that, but they don't understand that it's just not going to help. Yeah.
What would your sense be of maybe the more progressive, those senators that sit on the Armed Services Committee, Warren? Do you have a sense how she would respond, or have you?
Yeah, she has indicated that she's going to introduce it into the Senate.
Yeah. Warren's looking to resolution in the Senate too. Yeah. And we've early on we met with Kerry, the climate envoy, and had some meetings and discussions. But he's kind of he's of course in many ways he's failed us over the years. He just did. Whatever. He just is not much good, not much help for us so far, right? But we keep pushing. Say anything else, Gary?
No, that's great. Thanks again for the opportunity. And it is about education, and we can do something about it. And we have to amplify our voices. Our voices are worth as much as the head of Lockheed Martin. We just don't have the lobbyists. So we have to make up for it with numbers.
Yeah. I had some numbers on that. Another thing. I just gave a talk yesterday to a small group in front of the governor's mansion, the top line 3 group. So I have a little, but big 700 lobbyists, government advisory boards hiring 1,700 former Pentagon officials and stacking the government with their own people. These military contractors have numerous ways to determine Pentagon budgets, shape our foreign policy, create war fever, and pick our friends and enemies. They have huge influence over our government, You know, so people are doing, you know, divest and things like that, you know. Okay, but yeah, it's just unbelievable.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Gary, for coming through again and presenting this program, and hope we can do this again sometime, get another group together and talk about it again.
Sounds good. I love Red Wing.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, we do too.
Yeah.
We just wish it were a little warmer though, but.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay,
Thanks,
All
Gary.
right, I'm gonna leave. Take care.
This would be possible
Okay.
without him, believe me.
thank you.